So how bad are things? Should we all be depressed? I don't really want to be depressed.
This is an emergency.
The war in Ukraine is causing a global food crisis.
Set the doomsday clock at 100 seconds to midnight.
30 fires are still raging in Spain, Portugal, France and Greece.
Many of these wonders seem set to disappear forever.
Back in the good old days of 2019, you might have daydreamed of a disaster where you could play the hero, fight evil, and rebuild society into something better than it has ever been. Maybe that's why there are so many post-apocalyptic games. And then the new decade began. Since 2020, it feels like the internet's favorite game is Apocalypse Bingo. There's a war going on, climate change is increasingly rearing its ugly head, inflation is absolutely insane, and Europe might not have enough gas supplies in order to stay warm this winter. Fun times. But I have a question. Whether it's zombies, or climate change, or war, or the coronavirus's crappy cousin, what can you do when difficult times approach? How can you have hope in an apocalypse, or at least the end of the world as you know it? Now, if you agree with the definition of apocalypse as the end of the world as you've known it, it might be comforting to remember that we're not the first people to face massive change. With the Industrial Revolution and now the Information Age, the world is nothing like what it was 300 years ago. In fact, humans have been causing massive changes to their environment and dealing with the aftermath from the moment that they sprouted in Africa. We're simply very good hunters. On a more personal note, you can see the end of the world as you've known it multiple times in one lifetime. Although when I asked people how they deal with this, the responses that I got verged from pray to partay, which I honestly don't think is enough of an answer. So after a bunch of digging in NCBI articles and philosophical texts, this is my short list of how to handle it. How to live in the face of an apocalypse. Step 1. I started with hedonism. Axiological hedonism says that only pleasure has intrinsic value. To translate that into modern terms, YOLO at its finest. And for those that don't know what YOLO is, YOLO means you only live once. When facing the approach of times where there will be less to go around, live shamelessly in the present. So embrace hedonism. Party and dance, eat good food, meet charming people, go to nice places, and maybe drive fast cars until the G-force pins you to your seat. But intrinsic pleasure doesn't mean that you must jump on the hedonistic treadmill until you're buying or doing crazy stuff all the time. Despite its name, there's not much fun in being eternally caught up in that cycle. Besides, your body rewards you when you're nice to it. You get endorphins and dopamine from exercise, and your cortisol levels lower when you walk around in nature. There's something else too. The type of happiness that you get from helping others is called eudaimonic happiness. That might mean volunteering or working for a general good cause. Happiness researcher Elizabeth Dunn says that physically, eudaimonic and hedonic well-being are surprisingly similar, since the pleasure pathway that you experience is pretty much the same. So why not both? Combine hedonic and eudaimonic happiness. Now for some, happiness in the present might be enough. That might cover it. End of video. Finito cumplito. For me, it's not. I want to know, does it make sense to plan and hope and prepare for the future, or does it make more sense to just give up on it? This giving up is called a sense of a foreshortened future, and it's common in victims of trauma, those with long-term depression, and those with general PTSD. In the journal Frontiers in Psychology, individuals with this had a sense of a future without expectation of a career, marriage, children, or a normal lifespan. Does that sound familiar? The study continues and likens this feeling to her very life story collapsing. It's not simply that the person believes that she does not have much time left. The traumatic event somehow disrupts her ongoing life story, such that the story ceases to be sustainable. I mean, our way of life certainly isn't, so how do you look forward? Thankfully, the paper had a few suggestions. Give the person a new narrative, make them feel safe, and connect them with their community. And with that, we have steps 2 through 4. So, step 2. The world is changing, accept it. Okay, that sounds really harsh. Maybe a better way of phrasing it is update your life story so that you have more power over your circumstance. Curiously, this Stoic sentiment echoes research that says that the best way to get over trauma is to first give up false hope. A study in the Economic Journal suggests that hope actually can make people feel worse. For example, those who are widowed initially take it harder than those who lose their jobs, but the widowers on average recover better because they have to let go of the past. If you want to make a new personal story for yourself in the future, it's much easier if you can actually picture what that future world is going to look like. And it's one of the reasons that watching movies about pandemics can actually help people deal with the fact that they're living in a pandemic. In fact, fans of these disaster movies felt more mentally and emotionally resilient to the idea of a second wave of COVID than those who were not keen on the genre. But what is the new world going to look like? It's likely that we're not going to live through a full-fledged apocalypse, but rather we're going to face a world with hints of dystopia and utopia all at once. We'll have better medicine, cool robots, self-driving cars, and more pollution, more natural disasters, and heavy migration for resources and safety. And in 20 years, air conditioning will be our best friend. I mean, it sort of already is. Okay, so you accept your fate. Great. What's next? You have to feel safe. I mean, no matter how I approach the topic of a disaster, it's much easier to have hope if you can survive whatever bad times are coming. So, what do you think of when you hear the word apocalypse? Fires, scary horses, zombies, climate change, disease? I'm firmly in those last camps, but I'm no expert. I expected to be looking at a lot of underground bunkers, but much of the advice is a lot more boring and practical. In fact, you might have heard of some prepper pieces of advice. Waste not, want not. Don't draw unnecessary attention to yourself. Some prepping is better than doing nothing at all. In fact, the more that I read, the more it turned out that prepping is all about preparing for disasters that are very likely to happen. Maybe there's that one individual who is obsessed with a zombie apocalypse, but the majority of the time, it's about having water when you live in an area that has droughts. It turns out that the end of the world as you know it and survival are both incredibly personal. Also, we clearly do not agree on risk assessment as a species. So what do you perceive future risks to be? Generally, figure out where to get food, water, electricity, and medications. Step 4, don't face the end of the world alone. Figure out who your people are and keep them close. Long-term studies indicate that people who are in a solo survival situation, like getting lost in the woods, only have about a 20% success rate compared to individuals in a group. Part of it is because you can divide the work. Someone can hunt, you can make fire, and another person can say if the berries that you found are poisonous. But it's not just about distributing tasks. As frustrating as it is at times, we need other people. Friendship makes us happier, more resilient to stress, and literally healthier. In 2020, I was all about that social distancing, and the people who know me can confirm. Now, lockdowns can be an important tool for a short period of time. But being stuck at home or in a bunker all day, alone, for weeks on end, that's a recipe for depression. And depression isn't sadness. Easy tasks can become difficult, time can drag on, and it can actually damage your brain. How are you supposed to survive an apocalyptic scenario if you're depressed? Would you even want to? There's plenty of research that shows that loneliness is horrid. You're less likely to survive a tough illness, and in fact, the health effects of loneliness can be similar to that of smoking cigarettes. So don't face the end of the world alone. It can even be fun with friends. I mean, you can even sing songs about the undead and everything. But what if you are super alone? In one study in America, 1 in 5 people polled had no friends. That's an epidemic of loneliness, and it points to a flaw, or flaws, with the structure of American society. Honestly, I think that this is a topic that is worth an entire video, because it's a little bit patronizing to say, hey, you're lonely? Well, just get out there. Go, run like the wind. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. However, if I had to choose a starting point, it would be this. If you have a really limited social network, choose one person that you have some sort of click with and reach out, and try to connect with them as much as possible. And if you have any hobbies that you like, try to use them as platforms to meet like-minded people. One prospective study estimated that it takes 200 hours of face-to-face contact over a 3-month period to turn a stranger into a good friend. And spending 3 months for a lifetime of friendship is a pretty good deal. So far, everything that I've been talking about is about how you as an individual can prepare for catastrophe. But how do we get a mild apocalypse, one that is less spicy? And with this, I think that we have step 5. Hold the people responsible. Only then can things change. Statistically speaking, you're not Elon Musk. And if you are, that's really weird. Hi. If you're an everyday sort of person, don't bear the burden of guilt for our changing world alone. Instead, social pressure on organizations, whether that means Nestle, BP, a government, or other big entities, is probably the best thing that we can do. Their decisions impact us the most. Imperial College London even says that the #1 way to make an impact on climate change is to make your voice heard by those in power. So vote, protest, buy from companies that you believe in, and make noise about the things that matter to you. If you live in a democracy, message your representative. Harass them until they actually enact change. This is your world, and you have a right to have a say. Now, apocalypse predictions have been in fashion since the 1950s. It started with overpopulation and running out of gas, and I mean, we even had the Y2K scare back in 2000. That's not to say that disaster won't strike, but rather that we should spend our time doing something about it or enjoying our lives. Just because doom scrolling, the art of going through your media, absorbing one terrifying headline after another, seems to be an international hobby, doesn't mean that you should give into it and be paralyzed with fear.
I'm in danger!
Instead, have fun. And as cliche as it sounds, accept change. Have a safety plan. And find friends and keep them close. And finally, hold those responsible. Our future is fire and brimstone, miracles of technology, oases of promise, and getting drunk on the ashes of civilization. And even in the darkest of times, we'll find ways to laugh. Curious, and when push comes to shove, we can innovate and create what was thought to be impossible. Somehow, that alone makes me a lot more hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, we might make a good future to live in. So going forward, keep your eyes and your mind wide open. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you next time.